Hi, Katie. All set. I just talked to Jay.
Oh, okay, great. Have a great meeting.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
All right, it is 6:01 p.m. This is the St. Mark's Street Park Working Group. It is our third meeting. This is March 17, and it is 6 p.m. I think our first order of business is to review and approve the minutes of the meeting. Everyone has that, I hope. This is the meeting of March 10th. Any emendations, corrections, etc.?
Yes.
All right.
I did a few as well after Andrew.
Okay. James, are you ready? Okay. Under also present, because there were a bunch of other attendees there, how about saying also present and speaking? Because I think the three people, your list of the people that were in the audience and then spoke, right? And
yeah, that's a good point.
No need for question mark after Russ Horn, former member of the SHS. That's true.
But the question was, is he the Historical Society or the Historical Commission?
Historical Society.
Okay, all right.
Let me just quickly, if I'm wrong, I'll let you know, but I'm pretty confident that's correct.
And wasn't Michael Wysand at that point the Southborough Historical Commission?
No.
He was
Historical Society president.
They were both society. Okay, all right. All right.
And I think on the date under documentation of native burial site B, 2006 is correct.
Mm-hmm.
Under current plans for a park, under A, referencing room for an amphitheater, I would like to say amphitheater / pergola, PERGOLA.
All right, wait a second. Hold on. I'm looking right. Okay. All right.
Put that down.
Thank you. And then list of the documents referenced for park plans. I'll just
I have
say
them both open in front of me now.
Okay. Yep. Park plans dated June 24, 2021. I think that's a descriptive way of doing it. And you can refer to the SHS pamphlet as the title. I just sent it to you. A walk through the past. Yeah.
Perfect.
Again, good job. Have you filed the ones that we approved last time?
No.
Okay. I think you can do that. You email them to meetings@southborough.ma.
Yep. Okay. I will do that, James, unless you are madly committed to that. No, I can do that. Okay, so
I trust you.
okay, if you want to just email me the corrected versions of both of them, I will send them both in, if that works.
Perfect.
Okay. All right. Okay, so we'll vote on to accept the minutes of the 10th. Do I have a motion?
Oh, Grant, did you want to?
Yeah, I have a few more.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Also, I think that Dan is expected to join us here. So
Okay.
We've begun the discussion, but if he's got some comments, we should hear him out on that too.
All right. Grant, sorry.
Yeah. So just working group members present. My name is misspelled. It's Grant.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I think that's
Is that autocorrect? We knew you were great, Farrington. We knew that.
I didn't do it again, did I?
I think maybe once.
It's totally fine. But just
and also I spelled my own name wrong.
Yeah. And then under documentation of native burial site A, Farrington explains that ground penetrating radar would be hampered by recent, I think construction activity would be better because I don't know if it's technically in excavation. So
all right.
I agree.
let's see, I had the 2006 as well. So under current plans for Park B, I think if we could just spell out that it's the Open Space Preservation Commission, either when you refer to it up above when you mention Freddie Gillespie, either say OSPC up there, or under B, you could write out the full committee name just for clarity.
The first time
Perfect.
it's used, is it OSPC both times? Or it's open space? I know this is the problem that happens when we get too many acronyms going, but there are a lot of acronyms. Okay, so in other words, in current plans for the Park B, use open space preservation commissions instead of just the letters.
That's what I would do, just for clarity.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
I think that would be easier.
All right.
And then I think that's it. Yeah, I had the pamphlet as well. If we could put the actual name of it. So yep, that's it for me.
All right. Any others?
I think Dan is going to be coming on very shortly. I just resent him the link.
Okay, thanks.
Awesome.
Yeah, major applause for these minutes, James. They're really good.
Thank you.
What if we...
Here he is.
Okay.
Hi, Dan.
Hi, Dan. We're almost to the point of approving the minutes. We're still looking for emendations and corrections, if you have any, before we vote to accept. Do you have any corrections for the minutes?
No.
Okay, so then do I have a motion to accept as amended?
So moved.
Okay, so moved. That was Andrew.
Yep.
Okay, and a second?
Second.
Okay, a second, I'm going to say that's Grant.
Okay.
Okay, all right, so all those in favor, Landry, aye. Dennington? Mr. Sines?
Aye.
Oh, Farrington?
Aye.
Okay, and Nichols Worley?
Aye.
And Blanchard?
Aye.
Okay, the accepted unanimously. All right, shall we move on to item number 2? Because we do have 90 minutes tonight, and then we get cut off because the Zoom is being used by another group. So I'm confident we can get done in the correct amount of time. Dan, can you please give us a introduction to the amazing artifacts that you and your daughter picked up in 2 afternoons at the site?
Yeah, so we went also today, third, over the course of 3 days. Lot of pottery shards, some glass, trying to differentiate between what's glass plate and what is glass bottle. I think some of the pieces lend it, themselves easier to identification, whereas others do not.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that there are 2 really curious pieces, pieces that I've not really seen before. Some of the plating is, you know, and you've all seen the pictures. So as I'm looking at the collection now, there are some sizable pieces. I mean, they range, like I said, they range from dinner plates and teacups and those types of daily wear to pieces that are more in line with more industrial uses in the kitchen or in other areas. And they ranged from all over. So it's not from one particular location, but I think a lot of that is a reflection of how disturbed the site is at this point. So I would imagine that a lot of these pieces are moved. And there are a couple of others that I have shared with the group. I sent one with the entire collection.
Yes, it should be in there somewhere. It should be in the packet someplace. I sent it to Amy Berry at a few hours ago, and she said she included it, so it is there somewhere. What is salt glaze?
So salt glaze is an early type of glazing for pottery. And I mean, you can walk into a, it's still now used, but salt glaze became incredibly popular in 1780s as a way for, as kitchens became more evolved and cooking became more evolved. So certainly that's when salt glaze really took off, because it was a very, I wouldn't say it's a fairly simple process to make, and what is created is very durable. But let's see.
Andrew, do you happen to have in the packet the photograph that has maybe twice as many pieces as that? Oh, is that salt glaze? Oh.
So this is salt glaze. This is pottery.
Uh-huh.
I have no idea what this is. I've never seen anything like this before.
Sorry to interrupt, but Dan, you want me to share screen? Oh no, you're showing it there. Okay.
Yeah. So this is a piece. It's pottery. It's clearly glazed. I think the more fascinating piece is this one here.
Mm.
And you can see some of the marking of the original design.
A little bit of blue there.
Yeah, and that was very typical with salt glaze.
Uh-huh.
Today, there's clearly this is another type of pottery fragment, and it's different from the typical clay pipes that you would see that were used in drainage, because you can kind of see that there's a bit of a flute to the top of it. So I would imagine some sort of jug.
Mm-hmm.
And then, similarly, this is another piece. You can actually see the pattern of creation.
Mm-hmm.
And then, the one piece that I was really able to define very clearly was this nautical piece, which dates to about 1880.
So some of them look like they're thrown on wheels, and
so
others
some
look
of it,
like
yeah, I
they're.
would say a lot of it is wheel thrown. I'm not seeing any pinch. It's predominantly wheel thrown. I would say that in looking at it, there's probably at least 200 years, if not 250 years of fragments. And that's what's so cool about the site, is that there is so much there that covers such a vast period of time. So yeah, amongst the cigarette butts and the Dunkin' Donuts and some of the more modern pieces, you're finding bottling from early 19th century. You're finding fragments from 1800s. I would put, and I'm certainly no expert in any of this, but I would imagine that there are some of the fragments that we're looking at that probably are early 18th century. So you're really looking at a span of pieces, and this is really only a reflection of 6 or 8 inches deep. I would also say that in being over at the site, and this is not what I included, and I should have taken pictures, but it looks as though there is a second foundation that abuts the old burial ground. And given the amount of burnt wood and brick and mortar, and then there looks to be some kind of stone, it would not surprise me if remnants of a stone chimney, but it looks as though it was inhabited. But I have not seen any of that on a map.
No, that's not the old powder mill that they took down that used to hold the gunpowder.
It could be. But that's what I am seeing when I go over to the site. The smaller pieces reflect, some of the smaller identifiable shards that have patterns on them are remarkable in and of themselves. The little rose piece to a cup that still has the gold little band around the top of it. I found a liquor bottle, shards of a liquor bottle that probably were produced, I think, as the company that's marked it. It's a B with a circle that I have to investigate more, but it's clearly turn of the century. So, I mean, for me, this is the educational piece of the site. And the more I go, the more I find. And, the weather has also helped because rain does a great job of revealing a lot. And so certainly the plate fragments, the number of different items, the number of different patterns, the ages certainly reflect that this area itself was very used in a high traffic area. And that's not including a lot of the more modern pieces that I'm finding. I've really been trying to cull what I would consider to be historical pieces. But that's kind of where I'm at.
Was it customary when you had a group of people living in an area to have one place where most everybody threw their broken crockery and things like that? Pre-transfer station?
So the looking at the site, I don't know if the town had kind of an incinerary kind of area where people would go and burn their trash. That was very popular. That's very common before public and town trash dumps became kind of more consistent. But I'm not finding a lot of that yet. I think this is more just, I don't think it's a dump. I mean, if it was a dump, that'd be amazing. That's something that you would want to really get into and explore. So I'm not sure exactly what the site is. I'm literally just going and pulling out pieces. I'm not even digging.
That's fascinating. And there is foundation there, you think?
I think there is. It abuts the old burial ground. At least you have the wall, and then beneath, the excavators have revealed a line of stonework that looks consistent with the foundation.
Dan, I don't know if you had the chance to look at the video of our last meeting on the 10th.
I have not. I mean, we literally got back from Disney, and that's pretty much. Yeah. So that's pretty much where I'm still in recovery. So
I just mentioned because a gentleman named Russell Horn was one of the attendees, and he he lives in Marlborough now, but he used to be on the Southborough Historical Society in the early 2000s, and he was involved in the ground penetrating radar work that was done in 2000. You saw the reference in the minutes.
Yeah.
I believe that he said that at that location, he thinks that there was a school.
Okay.
I couldn't explain why, but He has done a lot of research looking at really old maps, and so that kind of what you're saying connects a little bit with what he was saying.
That would be, yeah, I don't think we would know more unless we did more digging to see really how big, and really what I'm only noticing one wall or one line of foundation. I'm not seeing other pieces, but I'm noticing a lot of brick and mortar. So
Are you using tools or just your hands?
literally, it's just we're walking across the site and picking things up off the ground. It's St. Mark's property, and so I don't want to put a shovel. I don't really have authority to put a shovel to it and to take a look at it. But literally, all of these things I have found literally just walking across the dirt. And eventually, these will all be given to St. Mark's because it's theirs. It's their history. It's Southborough history, but it's on St. Mark's property. But I think that's kind of where we're at. And I'm sure tomorrow there'll be more as the ground continues to thaw, as the ground continues to deal with the rain and all of that. Erosion will do a good portion of the digging. But of everything that you've seen, it's literally just walking across and picking it up off the ground.
Have you done other stuff like this before, or?
So I did work with Faye. So when Faye did the big renovations underneath and in front of the dining hall, kind of getting rid of the old cisterns and everything else, kind of going through the dirt there and discovering a healthy amount of pottery, as well as other areas on campus. So
how long did that take? And
so it depends
were you doing it as a
on.
volunteer, or were there?
I just did that as I'm a historian, so at least I like to think of myself as a historian. And for me, everything is connected to a piece of history. And so while yes, the pottery shards are not very descriptive, the amount of education that can be garnered from this is pretty cool when you start thinking about that. These are, everything that's now sitting on my dining room table is at one point used by a resident in Southborough. And that's what's really cool about it. And so yes, I have a Pepsi glass, a Pepsi soda bottle fragment from 1970. But I've also got, that's also in the same site next to a piece from 1880, along with other pieces that probably are early 1800s. And that's the education of the site. And that's why I think, when I think about all of the digging that was done for, I think this is kind of where the education piece is. The education piece is, what are we learning from the site? Not so much the erection of a monument. It's the incredible learning opportunity that there is in investigating a parcel of land that's been key aspects to Southborough history for 300-400 years.
Yeah, right in the middle.
So I'm doing I've been allowed to do some preliminary work at the Dockstone House, doing some digging around foundations there for Faye. And I had a pretty good morning this morning, but we'll see what comes of that. But I'm not even digging at St. Mark's. I would love to, but I think what's amazing is that this is what I'm being pulled out from all of the excavation work and stripping work that was done already.
Do we have a sense of the work that was done already? How many inches or feet of topsoil was removed as part of the grading that was done there?
I think it was different in different places. I know it had to be graded for drainage, and I know drainage pipes, big wide ones, were put in, and I know that quite a bit was moved because I believe that the drainage pipes were joined to the stormwater pipes under Route 85. So in places, I would say quite deep, like maybe 6 feet more. In other places, maybe not so much.
Yeah, I mean, where they put the sewers in, the sewer holes, that's deep.
Yeah,
But they were pretty isolated areas.
Yeah.
And that, for the most part, the deepest they got was closer to the cemetery,
mhm,
where maybe it's 1.5 feet
Okay.
to 2 feet. But as you get closer to where they graded the road, on the other side of that, it looks like it's just a matter of 4 or 5 inches.
Thanks.
okay. Plenty of interesting questions here. Plenty of very thought-provoking findings, Dan. That was really, that's just a trip through 200 years right there in the fragments you found.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, I mean, I think that the cool pieces would be, are there connections to, are there any, what are the connections, like who are the owners of these pieces?
Yeah.
That would be a fun
Yeah.
trip, but that would be a lot of work, but it's certainly enough for me to take a pause and take a look at it and say,
Mhm.
what are we, what are we doing?
Yes, and I'm very interested to hear your thoughts also after you have a chance to watch the video of our last meeting, which again seemed to decide on very little, but to open up a number of incredibly interesting directions and questions. So there we are. Since we only have 90 minutes, I think, Andrew, you wanted to talk about design options for the circle.
Sure. So, and this is Dan, this is kind of just repeating something that I said at the last meeting. So it seems like we've been kind of going on there's two separate tracks that our discussions are going on, which I think they can go forward in parallel. One is directly related to the charge, which I think remains very important, because the ultimate thing that we're going to do is report back to the select board on or before the 15th. And really the only, there's a select board meeting on the 24th, which is too busy. And then April 5th would be, there looks like there's a lot on it going to be on the agenda then too, but April 4th or April 5th would be a good time to come back and have some type of a report on the meetings that we've had so far. So anyway, I reported on a meeting that Marguerite and I had with Karen Galligan on March 2nd, where we looked at the plans and just talked about possibilities. So again, this is a discussion which is going in parallel with the points that you're raising. It's directly about the charge filling the circle and thinking about ways to address concern, a lot of the concerns that have been raised, and also the stakeholders that are nearby, including the library, open space commission, which contributed a lot to the designs of the gardens that would go in here. I floated this idea, which was kind of discussed at our meeting on March 2, to use the center circle as a place to have some type of a pergola, okay? And the idea would be some type of a central gathering space where people could gather, you have some shade, but still kind of work with a landscape design. And then there's a crescent area to the north of the circle where it could be, there's a space to fill in something there without much alteration of the plans in terms of the drainage and the pathways. And I thought that would be an appropriate place to have, again, this is extremely vague, but some type of a educational piece. I'm thinking about the word monument, marker, memorial, something that educates people that come to the site about the Native American presence in Southborough. And because I am not the least bit qualified to sketch out on a piece of paper what anything would like this would look like, but I have been walking around, and if I see things that look interesting, I take pictures on my cell phone. There's a lot of different concepts, but you could have a design competition right now. I don't know practically whether this might not be I think a design competition is something that draws applicants for really big projects. And since this is, I think, very, very interesting, but is relatively small, I don't know how many. I think it's the way to go, but there's a lot more detail that need to be fleshed out there. And another thing that we talked about is the importance of the history walk, because the history walk was a key piece of the grant that open space and historical that I thought were behind. This should all be integrated in a way that creates a historical walk with the old burial ground, townhouse, congregational church, and then this kind of new site in a way that recognizing that it's still an old site. And another reason why I am, again, I know this is going on in parallel because, Dan, I understand you want to first look at what's there now and have it inform what comes on top, right? But I lost my train of thought here.
The memorial and a competition.
Yes.
Or a place
Yeah.
of remembrance.
Oh, yeah, exactly. So that I like when I stand at that site. See, I don't have the expertise that you do about the fragments, right? But I just look at it. The location of it is so unique. It's actually pretty big. So the diameter of the circle that is shown in those plans is 50 feet. So that's enough to, again, I'm not talking about, like there's sometimes where people give like a lecture or a talk, right? You could do it outdoors. And a need of the library is an outdoor space to do readings with the librarian. This could be a space like that. People could come and they could see this, I don't know what the right term is, educational tribute, which would be the only thing in town. Ironically, one of the things we talked about is what other signs are there or markers about Native Americans. The only thing we could think of is actually, ironically, it's a new sign. It's like an old sign which was put back at the intersection of Parkerville Road and Main Street, which is worth looking at. And it's ironic because it's one of the old school type of signs that, I don't know if it's the Massachusetts, that was put up for the an earlier bicentennial or tricentennial, so like in 1936, right?
I think that
So
was the Daughters of the American Revolution doing that.
yeah,
I
it might
think
be
that was
something
the
like that.
DAR. I do. Yeah.
So anyway, I get excited about the idea of this park as a gathering concept, as I think that, and I said at our last meeting, and the point that you made at the first meeting, which I have held on to, is the educational value of this. And I understand, you want to explore the educational value of these fragments. But I also think that whenever this is going forward, that there is a value in using that crescent space to have an educational tribute to Native American history, and thinking about 2027, which is the tricentennial of the town. I just thought it was interesting. One of the things that the select board started to do is think of a charge for a committee for the town's tricentennial celebration. I like the idea of 5 years from now, you have this space is kind of filled out and it's a place that would recognize more of the town's history. So my thought in just bringing it up again was hopefully maybe between now and our next meeting, if anyone else has other similar ideas of things that would work within the existing plans, or would just require relatively small changes, that this is a good time to, I want to hear them. I hope the group can hear them and discuss them, right?
Okay, I'll throw it open to questions, comments. Thank you, Andy.
I think setting anything up using the Nipmuc name without their express approval is not okay. It
Right, I
doesn't
just
matter.
realized-
It doesn't matter if we all say, yes, this is what we're going to do. If we're going to use their name and put their name and their history on a marker in Southborough.
Okay, can I jump in here just very slightly, because I'm moving into the next agenda item, but I would like to fill you in on because this has to do with the fact that this working group has been proceeding in tandem. Partly, what are we going to do for park design? And the other part of the group is saying, but what about the space and the resonance of the space and the importance of the space? So I got on the phone and I talked to the following people, and this is what I discovered. Apropos of what you're saying, Dan, because I totally am on that page. All right, this totally on that same page. I talked to Cliff Wilson, who was in the historical commission in Ashland because they had the dig there. And he referred me to Curtis Hoffman, who was at Bridgewater State, who had done a lot of that dig, who was the academic who'd written a couple of books on that subject. And he referred me, after an hour on the phone, to Michael Zimmerman, who's the current professor at Bridgewater State, who has the GPR stuff, by the way. And I talked to him, and then he referred me to the Mass Historical Society, where I talked to Ed Bell. And then he referred me to talk to Ray Gould, who is she is in Nipmuc, she is at Brown, and I called her and I explained to her what was going on, and she sent me to talk to Jim Peters, who is the Mass Commission on Indian Affairs, who hasn't gotten back to me yet. But I think I spent, except for Ray Gould, maybe an hour on the phone with each of those people. The thing I learned is, one, we cannot use ground penetrating radar. It is too disturbed, it won't find anything. So that is off the table. Two, from Ed Bell at Mass Historical, the issue was, if state money has now been used for this, permitting has to be done through consulting the Mass Historical Commission. The contractor who does it has to consult the Mass Historical Commission before they do anything. And as far as Ed Bell could find, there was no record of that. Now, I don't know what, I suppose I have to talk with Karen Galligan and see whether any kind of permit or whatever it was drawn on that, but that's kind of a question mark I have written after that. I have the call in to Jim Peters, a Mass Commission on Indian Affairs, and I think that should answer the question about whether there is interest among the Native peoples in excavating or whatever they want to do. So that was my last couple of days, and I was interested to know that the GPR, we don't even need to think about that anymore, but that the possibility of an excavation. The other thing that I heard that was very interesting from 2 or 3 people is that sometimes it is considered better to pave over graves than to disrupt them by digging them up, which surprised me. But, so the issue might be, maybe there was no appetite to do a major excavation because it was thought to be better to just leave everyone where they were. So that was my findings. Any comments, questions, complaints?
I'll hop in on just one thing. I remember at our last meeting, Michael Weishan said he would send us the contact. Is that the contact you were just talking about?
The person at the Mass Commission on Indian Affairs, Jim Peters?
Yes.
Yes, yeah. I think it might have been, or it could have been, there was a person at Mass Historical called Jonathan, I forget the last name, but he's not there anymore. And Brona also is, I called her, but I didn't hear back from her, but the person, Ed Bell, that I talked to was completely capable of discussing. And he said, and I took extensive notes on this, that there should have been a trigger process. When a town is doing something, it's one thing, but as soon as there's state or federal money involved in something that's done to a property, it triggers a different set of requirements in terms of notifying Mass Historical. So that was news to me. And he didn't have a
That
record.
makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. He didn't have a record of that being done. But
Yeah, just my understanding is that the contractor, because the work that was being done required some type of a stormwater permit, hold the inventory of the site from the Massachusetts Historical Commission before doing that work. Now, I don't know that firsthand. I haven't verified it, but that's what I've been told.
okay, so that would have done. I think there's an inventory number, but when I talked to Mass Historical, they did not have. They had an inventory. They had inventory numbers for a lot of the buildings, but they didn't have. And they had one for the old burial ground, but they didn't have one for this parcel. That's what he told me.
Okay, and Dan, I can send you the inventory from we're talking about of the old burial ground.
Yeah, the one within the stone wall. Yeah. So, other thoughts?
Just, I have a quick reaction to what Dan was saying. I think that at the end of what I have in mind, Dan, it's probably not that. It might not be that different than what you have in mind. All right. I think the key piece that you said that's attractive to me on our first meeting was the educational value of it, right?
Mhm.
I mean, one of the challenges here has been every time someone points out, well, we should consult with the nipmunks, is that all these letters have been copied to Cheryl Hawley, and I guess no one has I haven't heard from her. I haven't heard from someone who said they've heard from her. So now Marguerite has got in contact with people who are maybe better people to talk to. And at the very first, one of the meetings where the working group came up with, or the meeting where the first set of appointments, Marguerite mentioned that she wanted to reach out to the nipmunks, and so that was part of it was contemplated that would happen at some point in this process.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of like it doesn't have a structure in the way that other groups do.
Well,
right, and a lot of that, and I think a lot of that is just because their tribal recognition's fairly new.
Yeah.
And so they're still building their tribal structure. And I would approach it from the perspective of no answer means no.
There is Chief Cheryl.
What if the effort is made here?
Sorry?
What if there's an effort being made here?
Well, no, I tried to reach
through
the website, but Ray Gould is a professor at Brown. She is a spokesperson. I think she has some Nipmuc or maybe Wampanoag. I didn't pay attention. I didn't write it down here, but I could find it for you. Either way, she's quite an articulate spokesperson. That is what she teaches, all right? Indigenous studies. And I think that when I asked her, I said, this is what we're doing. We're concerned about it. She said, call Jim Jim Peters, and he will tell you. He will tell you. So this is my next step, I think. It seems like that will come from the state level. And if we've done a lot of, I called the numbers that I had for Chief Cheryl Hawley. I emailed, I did everything I could think of, no response. That may mean that there's simply nobody there responding, but I think someone who's, working for the state of Massachusetts is probably going to respond. And I think that would be, and he's fairly well connected, obviously. And I think that that response would be something that we could follow. So I'm just sort of saying, I don't know until I hear from that person what their wishes would be. And I would assume that whatever he says is something that we would be able to act upon or not act upon or whatever we're going to do. So
I think that is a best course of action is to try and contact through the state, who obviously has more resources than we do and better established connections than we do.
I think, excuse me, I think another question here is, you know, let's just say, for example, that, you know, none of the Nubunk Nation or no other organization gets back to us. You know, we have a certain amount of information now about the site and artifacts found on the site. And so I'm curious what you all think about whether or not, you know, I think we can make a determination ourselves about whether or not we think that the site is sensitive enough or historically significant enough to make that determination for ourselves, you know, for ourselves, regardless of if we hear back from one of the tribes.
In speaking with my sister who works with the trustees, when they were trying to design trail names and amongst other things, trail plaques, incorporating different aspects of Indigenous people's history, their resounding answer was no. Right? They're not going to use their name. They're not going to use their, they did not give the trustees permission to use their history because they felt it was exploitive.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like we can do a wonderful educational piece about the town and the town history. But the conversations we're having right now are the exact same conversations that I would say that you know, the Nipmucs have fought very hard for recognition for a very long time.
Yeah.
They are surrounded by people inhabiting their lands. Their land rights are few. Their protections by Massachusetts and the United States government are few. If we want to write a history, we can do a chronology. I think there are a variety of things that we could do. But if it's not going to be done in partnership, then why are we doing this? And to whose benefit? Is the monument a benefit to kids in the town or to people in the town? Or is it a benefit to the Nipmucs?
And Dan, here, I think the key thing really refer to the monument. I don't know if I'm talking about a monument or look, I mean, one of the things that just inspired me in a way was, and I shared it with this Marguerite, I was in, again, this has absolutely nothing to do with Native American history, had to do with naval history in the 40s, but I was in New York City last month walking around in Battery Park, and at the very tip of Battery Park, I saw this marker that I thought looked very attractive, and it's all just kind of stone, and it works with grasses. And again, I mean, I could show it to you and think, well, that has absolutely nothing to do with the site, but it just points of, if you aren't thinking about what I have in mind is some type of a block thing with word, I don't know. I guess the idea is to get as much input into it as possible, and then have a couple different people present a couple different ideas. I guess the idea that I was, and you might not agree, but is thinking practically about the way to see something come together in a nice way. I think that the key positive from the meeting that we had on May 2nd is there is a space, and I don't know what the term would be, like the length of the crescent. This is probably like 70 feet long, right? So I guess if the concern is, oh, we're gonna, the town wants to build this park and put this really small little thing here as some type of like a, just small. No, I think there's more space to do something like that, right?
The meeting with Karen on
Bill
March
has his
2nd,
hand
you
up.
mean? Yeah, yeah.
Let me ask a question. Is there a section of that area that is more historically interesting than another? Something that would lend itself to an ongoing project for excavation, both to educate children as well as to educate other individuals in town, while the rest of the area could be developed for as a park for other purposes. And eventually that area where the excavations and investigations occurred, once the findings revealed themselves, could be turned into some sort of historical area that documents Southborough and its previous residents. Question mark.
Split use. Okay.
That would allow us to proceed with one section of that area, while at the same time making another section an educational process for anyone, all those who might want to participate and would be interested. And it would be done, of course, I think, in an organized way, so that we actually did get information out of it rather than just a happy dig over there. We may not, I mean, I have heard no convincing evidence that the Nipmunks, for example, resided or actually used this area, aside from the fact that there is a reference to it in documentation which may be more speculative than factual. I've read the book, for example, and there may be some truth to it, but there, I think, is some speculation to it also. So in other words, we don't have to get hung up at this stage of the game and whether the next Nipmunks or anybody else wants to participate in this until we have in fact done some historical investigation to determine whether in fact that particular area represents something that can be proved that they want to use or that they have historically used.
Okay, so that's a really good question, and I sort of have an answer after talking to Curtis Hoffman, who specializes in this area. He says that he's located 2,100 stone structures in the state of Massachusetts that were Indian built. And I can say Indian because it says the Commission on Indian Affairs, and that's what's the name of it, but I should say Native American, wrong me. Okay, anyway, he said he's located 2,100. He said to me that to the best of his experience, he doesn't know a lot of places in Southborough where there was settlement, that there were possibly one or two families living where St. Mark's is, Max, but he hasn't found much in that area of Southborough, mostly Ashland, mostly Hopkinton, the Southborough border where the river is, where the mill used to be that they tore down. So he was of the opinion that he didn't know of anything here, but it might have been one or two families who'd broken off from a main group. He spent his life studying it in Massachusetts, and I think that was sort of his best bet, Bill, to answer your question.
Well, I'm not even sure that was a specific question I was asking. I mean, don't forget that there have been a lot of individuals who have lived and died in this particular area. And it could be prehistoric. It could be the Indian era. It could be the settlers era. It could be something more contemporary than that. All of that is a nice story to tell about the history of this particular section and specifically the town of Southborough. But if in fact there is an area, whether it's near the graveyard or whether it's near the library parking lot, who knows, but somewhere in this park where we can say there is some likelihood that we might find something interesting. And then in fact, we could have a 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 year program to do excavation involving the schools, for example, St. Mark's, Fays, Algonquin, etc. We could have all those individuals as participants helping to document what's going on here. We could also have, of course, professionals who would want to come in, or historians who would be of interest in that particular area. And they would guide the process, but it could be an interesting educational process, while at the same time allowing us to proceed with the rest of the park in some form or fashion.
Okay, that's one option. And apropos of that, also, I learned, which I didn't know, that if an area does decide to go ahead with an archaeological dig, there are 4 firms in Massachusetts, and it goes out to bid to one of those 4 firms, and then they come in and they do the whole thing. But what you're describing to me is not that, correct?
No, it's not.
Yeah.
I mean, there may be something that can be uncovered that really does represent something very significantly historic. In which case, you'd want professionals to come in and take a look at it. I think until we can teach ourselves that that's the case or not, we have an opportunity to educate a lot of our citizenry, a lot of the kids, and others, for example, if we can decide that there is a section of this particular park that represents something that might be of interest, so that the rest could be developed for other purposes. And then the discussion of this group could revolve around that other section, because that's a more known area as opposed to the unknown area concerning that area where we want to do an archaeological dig. And I use that term loosely.
Well,
And then eventually, when in fact we've done it, proved, found or not found, then in fact that could become an historical area for the town of Southborough, describing what we have found and what historically we know about the community itself.
Okay, other thoughts?
Yeah, I would just remind everyone that we do have a letter from the state. And the Massachusetts Historical Commission did take a look at the site, and they have said in this letter that they believe that it's historically significant, and that they recommend an intensive locational archaeological survey, including a program of systematic soil stripping monitored by a professional archaeologist, that it be conducted on the site. So, I mean, we do have a formal recommendation from the state archaeologist for work of this kind. So I would just ask you all to remember that as we have this discussion.
But when I spoke, did you speak with the archaeologist?
I have not. I just have the letter from Mass Historical from.
No, I did speak with the state archaeologist. I spoke with Ed Bell, who's the second in command under Brona Simon. And he pulled up that letter and he looked at it and he said, I don't see any other permits or anything else coming in for this. These are recommendations. If state money has been used and the study hasn't followed state money has been used and it hasn't followed our recommendations, then the DOT is in violation. But I don't know whether that was an if. I don't know if the DOT did draw the permits, if that is what Andrew was saying, that Karen had said that the contractor had drawn the permits. And I don't want to get caught up in a game of gotcha with any entity at all. I just think we should be able to move forward and do the right thing without looking back at what was or wasn't done correctly. But I guess the issue for me is, it's like, Dan, I want to know what well, there were a lot of people living in this area who they all had histories, and I would like to know what the Nipmucks would like, and if they don't care, then there it is. But I would like to hear that first.
I mean,
I agree.
What is it? Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, James.
Actually, Dan, I was about to ask you a question. Is that you spoke about work that trustees had tried to do in the past. I'm just thinking, is that what avenues do we have? Because when I think about reaching out to the Nipmuc Nation and their representatives, is that I think from what other people have told me, is that it would essentially be exploitative. It would be a very one-sided relationship if we ask them to come help us with this history. My only worry is that us as the working group, we do not have a terribly lot to say that what we can do. It's a bit like, how do you help memorialize a group that, you know, the town of South, like the existence of the town of Southborough, one could argue exists, you know, because of the theft of land. So how do we approach that in a sensitive way? I just don't know, Dan. I wonder if you have any ideas in that end.
I think the best solution is not include them in to not include it. And it doesn't, there is no way that we can adequately address any of these issues. I don't think any of the educational pieces, again, I go back to who's the education for. I think if we look at it as in creating something that is past tense, for Nipmunks, it's very much present tense, right? And so the way that they understand their history is it's still very much alive and present, whereas I think we're approaching this from a perspective of it was history. And I think if we want to look at it as an educational piece, then it should be about present history, not about what Nipmunks contributed. There is no evidence right now that they were even here.
Bingo.
Right? So why would we do this? Why would we incorporate it? Is this about making us feel better because we're living on stolen land? Or is this about trying to create an educational program or opportunity for children who study this into way much more depth than any monument or however we describe it? All of that's being done in 4th and 5th grade already, to a much more significant with a more significant curriculum. You know, do we want to incorporate?
I'm wondering.
Do we want to incorporate Southborough as a traffic stop between Worcester and Ashland? Do we want to incorporate this into the more kind of looking at the 7 prayer towns, and Southborough being kind of somewhere in the epicenter of that? Do we want to look at Southborough as, right, and again, it's everybody's history, you know? I would be very curious.
What is your recommendation then? So are you saying that we should not contact anyone, or that the site should just remain as it is, or that we should just build the park without without any consultations or digging? Or I mean, what do you?
I think my recommendation would be that we look at however we want to call this memorial or whatever we want to call it, that it's actually something radically different.
Okay.
I think that's it. And all of that is, this is kind of where we're at now, right? We can't use ground penetrating radar. We can't do all of this, right? We've got the letter from Mass Historic. This is kind of where we're at. You know, do we want to use this as an opportunity to pull in all of the different aspects of history, right? So you have the wonderful placard that's on St. Mark's Church about Burnett, about the Burnett Fays who gave all of this money to build the church. Do we want to incorporate all of Southborough history into the site? But if it's 70, you're saying 70 feet, that's pretty significant, right? Do we want to do little chronological panels of when it was created? I don't know. And I understand that you want to have people design it. I would love to see what you actually have in mind. I mean, I think we're beyond something like what I've been to Battery Park. I've been to Gettysburg and Antietam. I'm certainly, as a town, what are we trying to create? Because if it's a history piece, I struggle with that.
I was going to speak, but then I saw Bill raise his hand, so I don't know.
Oh, I don't know, raise my hand. Dang, when you define history piece, what do you mean by that?
Something about Southborough history. What is South, right, I mean, so you've got, do we want to encapsulate Southborough history? Do we want to create a chronology of Southborough history? Do we want to memorialize important people?
Gotcha.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, I'm struggling with why.
What are we doing exactly?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, where did this and where did the idea of a memorial to the Nipmucks come from? Where did that originate?
It was jointly
Okay, so-
mentioned in a Board of Selectmen meeting, but here's my thought
right.
also, apropos of history and how to memorialize it. I've heard the word using that space for a meditation garden, or using that space as a peaceful area where people can simply go and enjoy quiet
James.
and thoughtfulness, independent of history or no history. So I hate to throw in another vegetable into the minestrone, but there's also a desire for a place that'll be a quiet area to sit.
But it's by a Route 85, right?
Well, I went in and I tested that, and I tested that at 3 in the afternoon. So granted, it wasn't rush hour, but I found that if you're near Route 85, it's medium. But if you're up near the wall, near the stone wall, it's quieter. It's pretty quiet. So are we going to make a place that just has a bunch of stones in it and nobody ever goes there? That's my concern, is that we'd make a place where nobody ever went. So I say to myself, again, what it is should be defined, but by how people are going to use it, and then make that. So what do we want? Do we want it to be where kids go for here's history? Or do we want it to be a combo? What, does recreation want to put something in there?
So just, Dan, getting back to your question, what are we doing here? I think we are, the question is, that is the charge. The charge was to appoint a working group to make a recommendation to the select board as April 15 regarding what should fill the circular space. There's been so much stuff discussed. I always think, how does that relate to the working group charge?
But wait, Andrew, wait. The selectmen will not be, I mean, we don't have a time pressure on this. If it isn't April 15th, everyone will live. We could make it June. We could make it later. I think it's important to hash this out and not to say, oh, we need to get it in by a certain date.
Well, I think that it's worth reporting back on where we are, right? So about what are we doing here? We're not designing a particular, I don't know, you ask a lot of good questions. Here's I'm focused just on the practical, right? That's the value that I think I thought, well, I should even really be part of this work group, right? But I thought there might be value as someone that's a bridge between the select board and that's interested in this topic.
Right.
And just a couple points. Let's not make the perfect be the enemy of the good. And what's frustrating is, I agree with Bill and what we heard at the last meeting. There's really I've looked at some of these maps. They don't really correspond to the layout of streets right now. I don't think there's any proof that these particular people run this particular exact spot at this time, other than what the stuff that you're doing informs, is some evidence of that. But my idea of picking out this particular place in the current plans to have something which would educate about outdoor history was just because that was a practical way of proceeding that would get something done that I think is positive without, because one of the first things the select board is going to ask about anything about digging or redoing plans is, okay, that means taking a set of plans that were already paid for and then doing another set of plans. You have to think about how much does that cost, and then when going out for another bid for that. I know that
But
at the
our
second meeting-
concern is, our concern, and I'll interrupt you, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I am concerned that we end up with a sterile space where nobody goes. And I think it's important to look at what can be there. I really do feel that a little bit of extra thinking right now, and instead of just hurrying, is important. I mean, we're all concerned that we have a space that's important here. We just don't want a bunch of bricks that nobody uses and people throw their Wendy's wrappers. You know, it's important to
I
me.
agree.
This is a good opportunity. It's not easy to think about these things, but it's a good opportunity for us to come together and say, all right, what do we envision as being a really nice thing there?
And we don't have to. There are so many different smart people in this group with so many different ideas that I don't really envision this as actually like there's this one very, very concrete recommendation that people are behind. I think where I was trying to go with this is, okay, here's an idea that I said, is there's another related idea that people have, so that you could maybe even give the select board some options. But the questions, Dan, that you were talking about are so big picture that what I'm suggesting is you don't need to make that decision right now, right? There's a space which is reserved for this idea. And by using that space, it's not that, oh, that exact part of this exact space was itself, like I think you mentioned before, the monuments, you know, like General Henry Knox was at this exact spot. It's not supposed to, that's not the idea of it. It's not like on this exact spot, something happened. It's just something make people think, because right now there's nothing, right? So
I agree. It's to make people think and be aware and have more sensitivity to, or I hate to use the word sensitivity, but more awareness of the people, all of them who've gone before.
What is
I think
Southborough?
that-
Yeah, but what has Southborough done for them, right? If we're going to do this, then we need to then we need to create the partnership.
You mean with the Nickmucks?
Or whoever, right? We're all very bright, but we have experts telling us don't do what we're doing. We have Mass Historic and the Archaeological Office saying exactly what we should be doing that we're not doing.
But
and that goes back to my very first comments, which were, yes, we've done all of this planning and we spent all of this money.
actually,
and yet to go back to it and say, well, but there are these other pieces and these other steps.
yes, and I'm not sure that the Nipmuc would be happy with doing an archaeological dig. What?
Just don't
what
know.
then?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I struggle with that we're going to proceed with a park that has a lot of potential for it, but it's also being built at great expense, and not so much expense monetary, but expense to the potential of what's being lost. And I think that's where I'm coming from. And I
But you're
think,
saying what would be lost is the artifacts that you want to look at?
I mean, I would, if we have experts saying that they are making recommendations that the site needs to be stripped down and it needs to be investigated thoroughly. That's not something that Mass Historic is going to do just because they can do it. That's an honest recommendation because of what they feel to be great potential.
And what they
Those
saw.
are the experts.
Well, those are the experts from Mass Historic, but what if you get experts coming in from the other side saying we don't want those bones disturbed if they're there?
Well, you're not going to the whole purpose of this excavation is that it is not going to disturb bones. Right? You're looking at burials that probably are very deep at this point in the ground. If they could be found, probably not going to be found, or they will be able to be located and marked, which goes back to laws and permits about unmarked burials.
And on that, just because this is what I do for a living. Anytime someone says this law requires this and suggests this wasn't done, I want to know exactly what statute is, what regulation.
Right.
So I've looked at the statutes in the Mass Historical Commission letter, and they were what I described the first meeting.
Yeah, and so I think that's right. I mean,
Can I jump in, Dan?
yeah, go right ahead.
I think the problem here is that there's a lot that we know that we don't know. We don't know what exactly a cemetery protection plan would look like. If, like, what would be the fruit of an archaeological dig? What exactly how that would work? We don't know what the Nipmuc Nation, if we can contact them, what they and their representatives would want, what they would recommend. And I think just in general, I don't think we have a good idea. We have an idea that we want some kind of thing to represent the history. My only worry is that, if we go forward with something, is that we leave out an important part of history. So I guess I think what we should do is that we should take the time between now and our next meeting and maybe put down a few ideas on paper and do a bit of research so that we can come back and we can debate or discuss some more solid ideas. Like what are the merits for not going forward with something? What are the merits for going forward with it? And what would be the potential ideas? I think per open meeting law, if we work on those individually and present them at the next meeting,
Yes.
would that be okay?
Yes, because I think that writing something down on paper and then emailing it to the whole group outside of an open meeting would be a violation of the open meeting law. So but the way you propose to change is good.
Okay.
Can I say, and tell me if you agree or don't agree, at this point, the only recommendation I could make back to the Board of Selectmen, and we're not done yet, is that the working group feels that it would be an error to move forward with the current plan to put the park there right now.
No.
I don't agree, but I
I
think
don't-
that
I don't think
If the working group fails to come to a consensus, and the selectmen say, okay, you can't come to a consensus, we're just going to build the park.
I would say at that point, I don't think it's up to us to recommend that they don't go forward with the park. I think it would be up to us to say, we don't think we couldn't come to a consensus on what you want in the middle there. That sort of central area where we're tasked with coming up with an idea for something to go there. I think all we can say is, if we don't come to a consensus, don't do anything yet. Don't put anything there yet. Wait.
Well, that's what I mean. In other words, if we can't come to a consensus and they build the park in July, the way the design is now, have we failed?
I don't think so.
And is there any other way we can do it besides going back to the Board of Selectmen and saying we can't decide because we see that there are several other issues here, and they say, okay, and they just build the park the way it's designed now?
my suggestion is, again, Dan, I think you framed it well at your first meeting, how your concerns are relevant to the charge, which is that you, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, I'm just trying to summarize that you believe that what is above the ground should be determined by what's under the ground. So I would express it that way. And then another point that I want to make, because you jumped on a little bit late, Dan, is there's 3 Zoom rooms. We're in room 2. The ARPA committee is beginning at 7:30 until we have to be out of here by 7.
We have 9 minutes, right?
To solve this entire situation. But, and the idea of the April 15th is what we talked about with this charge is, again, I drafted the first draft of this charge in December. It takes a couple meetings, a couple months to recruit volunteers, do interviews. We had our first meeting in February, but then by May 4th, 5th is town meeting. And while I don't expect that, it'd be useful for the select board to know where this group is going for town meeting, right? That's all.
I guess just a clarification on that. Why town meeting? Is that because of the warrant article about the easement? Is that why that would be our deadline? Because it seems to me like our work could go.
I feel like if I get asked, what are we doing with this? And we say, we have absolutely no idea, even though that we convened a working group that's had 4 or 5 meetings, it's better to at least say, the working group has talked about option A, option B. That's all. Because or else, I don't want to avoid the idea of just like a talking shop that goes off for a long time that doesn't really relate to the charge, right? This was really meant to inform some actual real decisions to make,
Well,
and
on that subject, if you don't mind me changing gears a bit, I know we have limited amount of time. So I know that in our first meeting, we talked about getting a representative from St. Mark's to join one of our future meetings and talk about the potential for a dig or something along those lines. Has there been any follow-up on that?
I know we're still waiting for a written response, and I don't know if we've heard back from the CFO. Me or Landry could certainly, Marguerite, sorry.
It's all right, I go by either one.
I write down the last names in a minute. Could reach out to the CFO, Rob Kuklevich. We should do this now before we go. We need to set the date for our next meeting. Is that I could
good point.
search around for someone to see if they could make it.
Yeah, that'd be useful, because I think, even though obviously I don't think we're going to come to any decision soon, it is one of the things we're talking about. So it could be useful, if St. Mark's still does own the land. So if they say no, under no circumstances will we do that, then that would be useful to know, or something. Yeah.
I'm going to be out. I am completely out of town, and then a meeting on next week and on Thursday. So week of the March 28th, I think is ideal. I mean,
when is that?
Week of March 28th. I don't think I had.
That's the 28th through the 1st.
Yes.
Yes.
How about Thursday the 31st? Does that work?
Works for me.
Works for me.
Yeah.
Should we do 6 p.m. again? Did that work for everyone?
Yeah. And this time, what I'll try to do is, if this works, I'll immediately go and try to reserve the room.
Okay,
That's
I
fine.
know it's difficult. Thursdays sometimes Fridays are better days. But anyway, there it is. Okay, so we have exactly 6 minutes. I just want to say, I think all we're talking about is very important, and it sounds very up in the air right now, but I'm sure it will all come down in the right place. And I'm glad we're asking all these questions. I think they have to be asked before we just steam ahead and do, plonk, there's a park. All right.
I'll send more pictures tomorrow.
Yay!
Thank you.
How old is your daughter who's doing it?
Yeah, see there, I think again,
Fabulous.
from an open meeting law perspective, the best is just present them at the next meeting.
Say it
Okay.
again. Set the next meeting. Okay, good. All
I'll
right.
present them at the next meeting.
Okay, everybody.
All right, sounds
Have a
great.
good week. Bye.
I move to adjourn.
Oh my God.
Do I do that or
thank
do you do that?
Oh, thank you. We do need that. We're just so, okay, so the move to adjourn came from James. Do I have a second?
Second,
A second from Dan. Okay, and we'll vote. Landry, aye. Mr. Dennington?
Aye.
Mr. Sines?
Aye.
Oh, Mr. Farrington?
Hi.
Mr. Blanchard?
aye.
And Mr. Nicholas Worley?
Aye.
All right, the meeting is adjourned. It is 7:26. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, folks.